And the next one is the separate existing modules to services strategy. This strategy basically says that we are going to handle each component of the system separately and convert it from a library to a service. So in our example, we have the monolith application, and then we take one component, in this case the shopping cart, and make it a service. This usually requires wrapping the component in some kind of API library, usually REST API, and running it in a separate process. Note that this step is not a trivial one. We usually can't just take a piece of code that was part of a larger code base and tear it from the other pieces. This code might be dependent on other classes, or it might be stateful, or might require frequent access to external resources. This code must be thoroughly reviewed, and usually some changes must be made to it before running it as a service. Now, after doing that, we now have an independent service that the other components can communicate with using its API. After doing so with one component, we can go on and convert other components to services using the same strategy. When we are done, we will have a pure microservices system. So, what are the pros and cons of this strategy? Let's see. The main pro is, of course, that we end up with pure microservices architecture. We are not stuck with monolith and some services around it, but the whole system is going to be modern, service-oriented. That's a big plus. On the con side, we have two things to consider. First, this approach takes time. We convert a single component each time, and it will take a long time until all services are converted. In addition, this approach requires a lot of code changes. We take an existing legacy code and convert it to be a service. As we said before, this can be a slow, cumbersome process. It will probably require an extensive code review and a lot of adaptations. But that's not all. After performing the code change, the whole system will need to go through a regression testing phase. After all, we have changed the core of the system, and we must make sure we didn't cause any damage on the way. This is another step that is not required in other, less intrusive strategies. Okay, so this is the second strategy for breaking monolith to microservices. And now, let's move on to the third and last strategy.